Okay, welcome. It is Saturday. It seems like we were just here just hours ago, which just happens to be the case. Welcome to Detroit in Black and White. It's a Saturday in Detroit. It's a beautiful sunny day out. The Tigers play again today. They lost last night 10-1. Now they're only 2.5 games ahead of Cleveland. Who knows what's going to happen? I guess maybe it makes for more exciting baseball, but they're playing horrible, which is not fun to watch. But anyways, we've got it's just Jim Nardone and I holding down the fort. We've got welcome, Jim. We've got Adolph and Vanessa are out of town, and they'll be back at some point. And so Jim and I are going to hold down the fort, and we're going to start off with Outrage of the Week. Jim, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I want to say hello. Good morning, Jill Sheridan, Go Tigers, Derek Henry, and Dorian Denard. Good morning to you. Let's talk about Jimmy Kimmel and freedom of speech for just a minute, if we can. I've seen a lot and heard a lot and a lot of different opinions. There's a big question on whether it's Jimmy Kimmel got canceled because he's lousy and he doesn't have a lot of viewers, or Jimmy Kimmel got canceled because of what he said about Donald Trump. He didn't say, what he said was not about Charlie Kirk, and right. Charlie Kirk's gone, so it really didn't affect Charlie Kirk. It was more about the president of the United States. So my position is we need to let it go. We need to let Jimmy Kimmel or whoever represents themselves or their organization say whatever they have to say, and I want to promote that on this channel. I'm probably going to say something today that a few people are probably going to disagree with and maybe be offended by, but I'm going to say it anyway because I think it's the truth. So, hey, Kenneth. So I just think we either are for the First Amendment or we're not for the First Amendment. And when we start getting caught up in what's acceptable speech or not, we have a problem. That goes back to Jeff Zuckerberg and what he said. He wrote a letter to Jim Jordan claiming the White House repeatedly pressured Facebook to take down certain COVID content, including humor and satire. So I think it was wrong then, and I think it's wrong now.
I agree with you. I think it's interesting. People sometimes make references to the 1930s in this administration. I do want to pull up a New York Times article from 1939 out of Berlin. And it says that propaganda minister Joseph Goebbels today ended the professional careers of 5 Aryan actors and basically denounced them for making fun of they were making jokes about the Nazi regime. And so he removed them. And, people say, oh, that's a harsh comparison or not. But I see a lot of similarities there where I've never seen this before in my whole life. I mean, I've been in the media my whole adult life. I've never seen one where the media has acquiesced like it has. I mean, I was at the Washington Post with the Graham family, and look, the Nixon in the 70s came after the Grahams and came after the Washington Post and tried to shut the Washington Post down. And the Washington Post, Kate Graham, to her credit, was like, fuck you. We're standing up to you guys. And, the Washington Post went out and Richard Nixon stepped down. So I've never seen, the Washington Post is acquiesced under Jeff Bezos. Initially, it was a great thing that Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post because he had endless money and he had a lot of access to technology that the Washington Post previously had not had. And so they were making money. But when they started losing money, which, look, you're in business to make money, they started, initially, the biggest thing they first did was they killed the editorial board had decided to back Kamala Harris in the presidential campaign, and he killed it and said, we're no longer doing endorsements. I don't have a problem with that. I've never loved the idea of endorsements for papers because it's confusing to readers, because readers say, oh, Washington Post is liberal and oh, the Wall Street Journal is conservative. I have friends at the Wall Street Journal, and there's a lot of it left. There's still some there. They're liberal. They don't reflect the editorial page, but their writing as reporters does not reflect anything. They are straight up, right down the middle. And so the idea, I mean, Jeff Bezos should have said in the beginning of the year, we're not going to endorse, but not after the endorsement was about to pop. You can't do that. So I find it extremely disturbing. I'll say the one thing I found extremely heartening were people like Jon Stewart, who kind of did a mocking of that. And we have actually a little clip here.
From Comedy Central, it's the all-new government-approved Daily Show. With your patriotically obedient host, Jon Stewart.
We have another fun, hilarious, administration-compliant show. We're coming to you tonight from a real shithole. The crime-ridden cesspool that is New York City. It is a tremendous disaster, like no one's ever seen before.
And so I do find that heartening that the voices aren't being totally silenced. Like we had, Adolf wrote about Mary Sheffield, and some people were trying to silence him, and Adolf said, "Screw that! I'm going to write another column about that." So I think it's really important to stand up more than ever. And as Jim said, regardless of what you say, I mean, look, the silencing, the killing of Charlie Kirk silences the voice, which I'm totally against. But I'm also totally against them silencing Jimmy Kimmel and the FCC commissioner, the head commissioner, threatening ABC, which is totally unheard of, just saying, I don't like what he's saying. And people are saying it's so offensive. I mean, when you hear what Trump says, call it Rosie O'Donnell a pig, and making, some very harsh comments about people, and people are okay with that. And then Trump is like, oh my God, I'm offended. That's so harsh. Jimmy Kimmel, he hates being criticized. And there's no group that criticizes him more than late night TV comics. So
can I add something? Can we take a couple of comments? And I want to comment just quickly. Dorian. Control of narratives has always been linchpin in any society. Not saying any of it is right, but it does happen. Talked about Kennedy, Dorian, and Dorian went back history, fellas. This happened before. Wilson did it over 100 years ago. Nothing has been tried. Nothing that's not been tried before. And Jill Sheridan talks about Trump would have wanted laughing and Johnny Carson taken off the air. Thank you. Good morning, Timothy. But I want to read a quick quote from the ACLU. I think it's going along with exactly what you're saying, Allan. Is they were talking about this, and they said, now, this is the middle of the quote. It's not the whole thing. It said, now, using a long-standing government tactic, the administration is leveraging a tragedy to justify its censorship campaign. What are your thoughts, and what are our viewers' thoughts on that?
I think the problem is they are using Charlie Kirk as a way, to silence people and say, how dare you, criticize. I mean, look, Trump criticized the Pope and nothing happened to him. Trump has criticized, I mean, you talk about offensive comments when he talked about John McCain saying, I'm sorry, my heroes are people who don't get caught. I thought that would be the end of him, but apparently there's an incredibly high tolerance for what he says, but not for whatever. I want to read a quote from Herbert Hoover, a former president from way back. He says, it is a paradox that every dictator has climbed to power on the ladder of free speech. Immediately on attaining power, each dictator has suppressed all free speech except his own. And I'm sorry, people may quibble about the term dictator or whatever, but I think it's pretty apropos for this. We're talking about, free speech. And I agree with you. Look, the Democrats, whatever they try to do to suppress things on Facebook or whatever, we should have, within reason, look, some of the stuff that Trump has said on social media and stuff like that, he finally got kicked off. I'm sorry. I have friends who've gotten, penalized, and their accounts have been frozen for a week or two because they said something political, and it wasn't even offensive. It was just a political opinion, and they were told, this is too political, we're taking you out or whatever. But It's a dangerous thing when we start taking away. It's like my feeling about Charlie Kirk is like I didn't buy into, subscribe to a lot of the things he said, but I did buy into the fact that he has the right, and no one has the right to kill somebody over something like that. And the same thing, Jimmy Kimmel has the right to say stuff. He's a comedian. He's a satirist. He's a political commentator. That's his job. And now he's been kicked out because, and I think ABC is potentially, they're worried. There's talk about boycotting their advertising. They're talking about I know people are canceling the Disney Channel. They're going to pay for it. And I think they're worried about that as well. And in the end, money talks, I guess. So
Karen Winston, Facebook shut her down for 30 days last year. 30 days. Now, Karen, you're my new hero. I appreciate it. That's a good thing. No one really knows why he was killed. Dwellia, good morning, Dwellia. You're absolutely right. And as Allan pointed out yesterday, we can't, he didn't say it this way, but I'm going to say it this way. You can't punish a whole group of people for the actions of one man. That's just ridiculous.
I mean, that's the thing is that, look, the right wingers who have gone into the synagogue, in Pittsburgh and killed those people. And, they were promoting their Nazi beliefs or whatever on social media. It's like, we don't take, people who might be liberal or Democrat say, oh my God, all the Republicans are this or that. It's funny. One time just to kind of mess around, this was 2000, I remember 2004, I was driving back. I was living in Washington. I was driving back from Detroit to Washington. I was in Pennsylvania. I was kind of bored driving through the turnpike. And I was listening I couldn't get much on the radio. And there was a religious radio station. And they were talking about the Democrats. There were some Democrats who were unruly at the Republican convention in New York City in 2004. And they were all going, oh my God, the Democrats are so violent and blah, blah, blah. So I got on my phone, I called the station, and I said, hey, I'm listening to all this stuff about the Democrats. And I said, so is it fair that, for one or two people who might have killed somebody at an abortion clinic or something, should we say all the people who are pro-life are violent? And they're like, oh my God, that's so wrong. And they hung up on me. And then they were talking how they were wrong. Then I was trying to make a point that we can't, these are lone wolves a lot of times. They're not working on behalf of organizations. There's not a big conspiracy. There's not a whole group plotting this. Even the Oklahoma bombing, which I covered in 1995, where Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols blew up the federal building in Oklahoma, killed, I think it was 168 people. They were just a small little group. I don't think, they were believers, and they were out in Arizona. They believed in some right winger in Arizona who was preaching kind of violence and stuff. But we never saw a case of conspiracy. James Nichols, his brother, was never charged. He was arrested. He was detained for a month. And I can't remember what they call it, something witness.
Right.
Something where they kept him for a month and they had to let him go. And, and at the time, I believe it was Louis Freeh was the FBI director, and he was calling the FBI and the U.S. attorney here and saying, charge him with something, anything, hold him. And they couldn't find something, and they let him go. But I had somebody slip me a phone record that James Nichols was talking to his brother Terry the night before, and makes me think. And then I used to visit the farm after the bombing. I'd go out there once a week in Decker. It was about 2 hours north of Detroit. I would talk to Terry, and Terry was a believer. There were a lot of farmers who were angry at the federal government for foreclosing on federal loans to their farms. And farming is big business. It's millions of dollars in equipment. And a lot of these people were angry. They hated it. I saw there was a militia up there, and I talked to people up there, hated the federal government. And I didn't know that at the time until the bombing, but whatever.
Should we take a break?
Yes.
With Allan Lengel west of Breezewood?
Let's do it.
Between Hagerstown, somewhere there?
Yes. All right.
Hi, I'm Eric Sabri, your Wayne County Treasurer. Are you living in the home of a deceased family member and you're facing property tax foreclosure, or maybe you know someone who's in the same situation? The probate process may be helpful to you. If you file a probate petition and notify our office, the foreclosure proceedings will be halted during the probate process. We have several nonprofit partners who have free attorneys who can assist you. Contact our office, 313-224-5990, or email us at taxinfo@waynecounty.com. Don't lose your family property. Some of these properties have been in the family for 4 or 5 generations. Contact us now. We're here to help.
All right, we are back, and that's McShane's at the corner of Michigan and Trumbull, which we haven't been there in a while, but the owner
We'll be
was
back, right?
very gracious to let us broadcast out of there. So
We look like the 2020, I'm sorry, Allan, the 2024 Lions on injured reserve right now, but we're hoping to be back to full strength here soon, right?
yes, we're holding. We've got some injuries, but we'll be back at full strength. So you want to read a few things, and then
I
Jim,
do.
you want to get into the resolution that was passed by the House commending Charlie Kirk for what an amazing human being he is, and that not everybody bought into it. I guess really the Democrats didn't. So.
And I want to go back to Deborah G, but I want to start the bottom here. I'm kind of going backwards. Dwellia said Charlie Kirk was asking for complete transparency on the Epstein files, and with his platform, Mr. DJT, the president, was not happy. You guys are holding things down properly. Thank you, Dorian. We're trying. I was wondering if you would be broadcasting from there again. Oh, McShane's or the Turnpike? I think she means McShane's.
McShane's probably. Yeah, I think we had a couple of challenges there. One, it was noisy sometimes. People would come in the bar and they were talking really loud. The other thing was our internet connection was not as good. I mean, you can see now, and even when we're in the Guardian building, which is now one of the spots where we do live, it's the internet's, there's a better connection there. We have a little bit more control over the environment. I love the idea, the concept of being at a bar where people are coming in and out. And we did have one incident where somebody in the bar challenged you during the broadcast, which was made for some amusing video. But
I don't know. I think the bets were on her instead of me. I think that the money line was on her and not me, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Terry McCrimmon, it's bigger than Trump. It's a whole group of people, from the Supreme Court justice to the new FCC chief to Fox News, the Republican lawmakers. I know that Breezewood exit very well, Karen, as I do. My mother was from Richmond, so we spent a lot of time on that turnpike too. I like Maryland. It's beautiful over there.
Maryland is a great state. I taught at the University of Maryland.
And yes, and Adolph was over there, and Frederick for a while.
Yep.
Trump is garbage too. He came right out of a piece of trash. I want to go back to All in the Family, Karen Winston. Yeah, can you imagine All in the Family being on it? It's hilarious because it's so ignorant. I agree with you. If Trump doesn't want to be criticized, he should resign, Timothy. And I want to go to this comment that Deborah made, and I want to move on from that and talk about not only what she said, but what we're all talking about. Kirk was a piece of crap and got exactly what he deserved. He promoted hatred towards black people. He was evil. He said that people have to die so that we can have the Second Amendment rights. I know. Okay. There was another comment about somebody mentioning about the Fox News guy who said that basically homeless people should be, or unhoused people, as they say now, should be killed, that they should be, euthanized or whatever. And that person came back on the air without any issues and stuff. And, some people might find that offensive when you're talking about exterminating
a group of people, and so, but he's back on the air, and nobody seems to be so offended. And I had somebody comment on my Facebook page yesterday saying that half the country was more than half the country, the majority of the country was outraged over what Jimmy Kimmel said, which is just not true. I mean, if you look at it, I mean, there were some people, who have taken advantage of his death to try to, turn up the heat and weaponize it to say, how dare you say anything about Charlie Kirk? How dare you say anything bad about him? But, as somebody said, you don't totally, how you lived and what you said when you were alive doesn't totally like become angelic when you die. And so people are entitled to have an opinion about him, right or wrong, just like, I think Jimmy Kimmel was entitled to say something. But let's get into the House resolution, Jim, and I know you want to talk about that.
Two things. I think Deborah touched on my sticky notes today. She touched on two of the items I really want to talk about, and one of them is I don't want to belabor the Second Amendment. We've talked about it till we're blue in the face, and it's kind of getting tiring on this show. But I don't want to talk about the Second Amendment. But I do want to talk about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They call her AOC. That's her name, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, on Charlie Kirk. On September 19th, there was a floor vote, and I think 58 people voted, hey, G Money Hollywood, voted against honoring Charlie Kirk. And, I talked to a Democrat last night about 11 o'clock who said, to what end did she come on and say what she had to say? This is where I disagree with that position. She was very decent when she talked about Charlie Kirk. She mourned his death. Everything she said was respectable. And we need to honor and put some faith in these individuals that represent us in Congress. What she said was her truth. And if you listen to the 3 minutes and 47 seconds, even if you're a supporter of Charlie Kirk, there was 1 million people that were outraged over it. They didn't listen to what she said. You need to listen to what she said. She talked about Charlie Kirk, how he didn't deserve to die, and how she felt bad for his wife and his kids. She also talked about who she thought he was. She has every right on the floor of Congress to say that. She may not be my favorite congressperson, but listen to what she said. Don't watch the 37 seconds on Fox News or on the Daily, whatever channel. Watch the 3 minutes and 47 seconds, and you'll know what she said, and you should respect it. That's my position, Alan.
No, I agree. I think, having a resolution, I think, I don't know. I'm glad some people voted against it. I don't think he's worthy of having a congressional resolution, but I'm not. I understand some people do feel that way, and they did vote to, pass a resolution on that. But, and I know some of the professional, the NFL teams, some did some commemoration during or before the games for Charlie Kirk. The Lions did not. And I tend to think that the Fords are more Democrats than Republicans these days. But I think for somebody who's so controversial, and said, I mean, when he says, if I get on a plane, I see a black pilot, I'm worried. I mean, that's pretty offensive. I mean, it would be akin to saying, hey, I was doing a deal with a Jewish real estate agent. I'm worried he's going to rip me off, because he's Jewish. And, I mean, when we perpetuate this bigotry and stuff, like, people are entitled to say that. That's their, I tend to think if you have prejudices, keep it to yourself or keep it in your tight little circle of beer buddies or whatever. But when you're putting it out there and promoting it, and college kids are saying, yeah, he's speaking the truth, I feel the same way. Well, that's your prejudice. You don't know that pilot. You're making an assumption based on race. You don't know this person based on assumption of religion. And it's okay. We all have some prejudices, but we keep it to ourselves. We don't promote it as the gospel. And that's the problem with what Charlie Kirk did, is that he promoted some of this stuff as a gospel. He did. It was great that he had dialogue on college campuses. That's admirable. But he also said stuff that college students were like just sucking up. And a lot of people, I mean, there's a lot of people mourning his death, and they should, if they really, look, I was upset about Jimmy Kimmel, and there's a lot of people who could give two shits about Jimmy Kimmel. They don't like him. They don't agree with what he did. They don't agree that he was going after Trump all the time. That's America. We have a constitution which has protected us from not being a fascist state, but the Constitution is being eroded. I mean, if you talk about being an American, our Constitution is flawed in some ways, but it's still a brilliant document that has served this country so well. You can't have a civil society, you can't have a democratic society without laws and without a certain set of standards. And it tries to, I mean, the idea that all, the Bill of Rights says all men are created equal or whatever, and women, I mean, we saw women weren't able to vote till whatever, 1921, whatever it was. And, and we had slavery in this country. While we had a constitution and while we had a Bill of Rights, we had people who were enslaved who were not equal. And so that always is mind-boggling. But the idea is to try to be as true as we can to these documents, which are there to protect our rights.
And G Money Hollywood had a question. I think we need to talk about that after we finish this topic. So we won't forget you, G Money. But I think she said she wanted that we need to be united. We need to unite the division, AOC. I don't know that her comments united anybody, but I don't think that if you read them, she divided anybody. And I give her credit for standing up and saying that. Whether I like her or don't like her, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I hate them all equally, I think. No, just kidding. We have good people in both parties and we have bad people in both parties. And that kind of leads me to another point, if I can, Allan.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Jasmine Crockett. I know she's
before you do that, I just want to read one of the AOC. It's a soundbite where it says, AOC said, "We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was, claiming his rhetoric, quote, his rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans." I mean, it's obviously not complimentary, but, it's America. She's entitled to an opinion of somebody.
One piece of it, Allan. It's not
right.
the 3 minutes and 47 seconds.
Right. But she also did not condone the death. I mean, we all agree that the assassination was, or whatever you want to call it, was horrible, and for a guy who's speaking what he sees as his truth, a lot of people, and like I say, I didn't agree with a lot of things he did, and I think some of his stuff was just kind of bigoted, but he's entitled. We have the Nazi party. We have people who are, Nazi sympathizers. I went to when I was at the Washington Post in, I think, 2006, I covered a Nazi rally outside the Israeli embassy. And they were chanting stuff like, which was, the Palestinians wanted nothing to do with it, but they were chanting freedom for Palestine, a rope for every Finkelstein.
I remember, yeah.
And it was funny. I went back to the office to write the story, and I told the editor, it was Saturday. My editor was black. She sent me out there, and she said, I said to her, "Look, I have to fully disclose here that my parents were Holocaust survivors." She said, "Don't worry about it. Go out there." And I went out there and interviewed these neo-Nazis who were doing Sieg Heil salutes, and I wrote a very objective story, but they're peddling hate, and so in there I wanted to include that chant that they were doing, freedom for Palestine, a rope for every Finkelstein, and my editor's like, "No, we can't do that." And I said, "Why not?" She says, "Well, it's too inflammatory." And I said, "Too inflammatory? You sent me to a Nazi rally. And I want people to see what these people are, what they represent." And we went at it for about 10 minutes. I finally gave up and it didn't make it in. But, they were entitled to chant that. And as much as, they hated blacks, they hated Jews, they really hated Arabs, which was it was sort of a joke that they were pretending to be demonstrating on behalf of the Palestine. And at the time, Israel was at war with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, and that was sort of triggered that whole demonstration and stuff. But anyways, okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Well, I'm gonna stop and talk about G Money Hollywood's comment if I can.
Sure.
G Money Hollywood talks about alleged or suspected, we'll call it a death at Delta University in Mississippi last week. Do you really think he hung himself? This is what somebody prominent, and I can't remember who it was, so forgive me for that, a prominent activist, it may have been from the NAACP, somebody said it, that it's Mississippi, anything's possible, and we need to wait and find out. And I think that's a great starting point. The sheriff said they see no signs of foul play, but that's happened before. We need to find out what really happened down there in Mississippi. I guess 2 people they found hanging, a white man and a black man, like 30 or 40 miles apart. If my information's right. What are your thoughts, Allan?
Yeah, I mean, it's always obviously suspect. I mean, hanging is just such a, particularly in public, hanging is such a rare thing these days. I mean, we saw it down in the South, back in the day where people were being lynched. And so I think it has it very, very emotes a lot of very strong emotions. When we see that, I think, I guess we have to see what the proof is. I mean, we don't want to jump to, what was it, Jesse Smollett,
right?
The actor in Chicago, who I think they put a rope around his neck or something, and it ended up that he staged the whole thing. So it's easy, as you know, in law enforcement. I mean, it's always easy to make assumptions and then go on it and be blinded by other evidence, which shows to the contrary. But I mean, it's obviously a very unusual circumstance for somebody to, be hanged in like that. And it certainly requires an investigation and pulling cameras or whatever there is. I would assume, I mean, nowadays you can't do anything without being caught on video, or pretty much. It's rare these days that there's not a video somewhere. I don't know where the person was found. It was near a campus or something?
It was Delta. I think it's Delta University.
I mean, we know college campuses have lots of cameras everywhere, and so I can't imagine that there isn't some camera that might have caught what was.
So it's probably not a very good answer, G Money, but I think my only hope is that they do a thorough investigation. We had a similar incident in Trenton a decade ago when I was the chief. A young black man had hung himself, and a few years later, a friend of his who he was partying with came out and said, that the police chief was involved in this and that, and he didn't hang himself. The drug dealers got him, and I looked at the pictures, and he hung himself. It was a tragic death. I knew the young man. It was a tragic death, but it was a hanging, unfortunately, and it's still tragic. But a couple other comments.
Let's do a commercial, and then we'll come back. We'll read some comments, and we'll be right back after this commercial break.
Homeownership opportunities are rising in the city of Detroit, and there's a house out there that's right for you and your family. You don't even have to worry about credit or getting a loan. You can win a house for as little as $1,000 and pay for the renovation cost as you go. It all starts at buildingdetroit.org and the Detroit Land Bank Authority. Our auction and Own It Now programs offer a variety of houses in neighborhoods all over the city of Detroit. These homes are in desperate need of repair and new ownership. You can begin by going to our interactive map and detailed property listings to find the right fit for you. It won't be easy, and renovation costs are not cheap, but our compliance team is there every step of the way. We will help you track your progress and connect you with local discounts to save you more money. We have already sold more than 15,000 homes in the city of Detroit, and our inventory is shrinking fast, so you don't want to miss out on this wonderful opportunity. Start your home buying journey today by visiting buildingdetroit.org. Homeowners.
All right, we are back. So go ahead, Jim. You wanted to, I think, read
I
some.
just want to read a couple comments. Thank you, Terry, for your comment. For every 100 that one, they kill 5,000 more little black boys are born, and that's our future. Good morning, Ira. Not a day goes by. Nowadays, sorry, Ira. Nowadays, because of technology and certain morphological details in DNA, it's fairly easy to determine foul play. Well, that's Ira Todd, is Detroit police legend. Thank you for your comment. 8 lynchings in the last 8 years in Mississippi of black people, mainly black boys and men. G Money Hollywood. Well, then, if that's the case, and I don't know whether it is or isn't, we need a more impactful federal government like we had back in the earlier days. Compared to what my grandparents and great-great-grandparents went through, I know we can survive the MAGA movement and thrive, Terry. Thank you, Terry. That deceased young man's arms and legs were broken. MR, Mr. 1213. If that's correct, then that would be obviously foul play.
Well,
I don't feel bad about anything about this guy or his family. Nothing, absolutely nothing. That's Deborah G. Thank you, Deborah, for your position. So somebody talked about, I think it was Kenneth Reed. I don't see the comment now, but about laying him out at in the rotunda.
In rotunda, is that? I've heard that.
I don't think they did it, but I think it was
talked about.
It was discussed. I mean, I guess the question is, how would we have felt if they laid out David Duke in a rotunda?
Yeah.
I mean, to some people, he's maybe more dangerous from their perspective. Go ahead, Allan.
Yeah, I mean, it's the idea. I mean, first of all, he was flown on, I think, Air Force Two. His body was flown. He was treated like a politician. I mean, we've had a lot of politicians who have died, and they haven't been treated that way. But I guess the inside when you run the joint, I mean, people do invite people to sleep over at the White House or whatever. But it seems a little bit. I mean, the idea of the rotunda. I was in Washington at the time when Ronald Reagan died, and the Post had 24-hour coverage. I happened to have the midnight shift. There were lines for 6 hours waiting for people to go into the rotunda to see Reagan, and we kept going in. The reporters would run into the rotunda just to check out things. The casket wasn't even open. It was a closed casket. I mean, I think it would have been cool to have an open casket, and then it would have been maybe worth standing there. But people flew from all around the country. I interviewed a corrections officer who flew in on his day off from work to stand and pay respect to Ronald Reagan. And we interviewed people, and it was interesting because a lot of people loved Ronald Reagan. Obviously, if you're going to stand there for 6 hours to get into the rotunda, but there were people who were trashing Bush at the same time, Bush was president at the time, which was interesting. But I mean, that is a holy sight that you don't. I mean, the idea that it would have even been discussed is just, I thought it was kind of crazy. But
can I go to an Ira Todd comment?
Sure. IT, the man.
He is. He investigated a hanging, a suicide, and we were talking about a suicide that I was involved with earlier. I wasn't involved with, but involving U of M student. Between the investigators at U of M, it was clear that no foul play occurred. I want to talk about that for just a second. We have to be a little empathetic to people that lose family members, friends, spouses. Nobody wants to believe that their brother died of a drug overdose or they were involved in a criminal activity. And those things happen, right? There's Allan, as a journalist, Ira Todd can tell you that. I think most people's initial reaction, it's a defense mechanism, I think, that goes and says, well, my son didn't die from a drug overdose. This happened, that happened. And unfortunately, suicide is a real problem in our society, and that's something we need to address.
I think, I mean, we're sometimes blinded by family. I mean, how many times have we seen like somebody's suspected of being a mass shooter or whatever, and the family's like, oh my gosh, no, not him. He's like, he would never do that or whatever. But, you know, people's surprise. I'd like, we've got about 20 minutes left here. I was curious. I was curious. We haven't seen James Craig in a little bit. He had, and let me play this. This is when he first announced that he was running for mayor.
Stand before you not as a candidate, but as a son of Detroit. Someone who has walked these streets, faced the same challenges, and believes deeply in the strength of our community.
So James Craig is 69 years old. He ran for governor, and he came out as sort of a front runner in the Republican race there, and then he faded, and then he ended up getting kicked off the ballot because of bad signatures on his petitions. And then he announced, I think it was maybe in 2024 or maybe 2023, he was going to run for U.S. Senate. He quickly withdrew from there, and then he ran for mayor, and he was polling pretty well, where he would have had a shot to be at least one of the two candidates who made it. He was up there, and he just is not a good campaigner. He ended up with getting, I think, only about 6% of the vote, which is just crazy for a person who had a brand, who had a name. And so my question is, have we seen the last of James Craig as a political candidate? And why is he done so poorly in his campaigning? Jim?
I don't have an answer for you. I thought he was a well-respected chief. I didn't agree with everything he did. There's a few things that I thought were critical that he did wrong when he was police chief. I don't want to get into the details. And I'll give you one detail. He was not certified as a police officer in the state of Michigan, which to me is...
Why was that? What would it take to be certified? What was the...
Probably about 16 or 18 hours of training and legal updates and firearms training. And to me, that's... You know, if you're committed to the community, you're committed to the 700,000 residents. I just felt that he should have done it.
Right.
There's no requirement for a police chief to be MCOL certified. That's the group that certifies police officers. There's no requirement for a chief, because typically a chief and a chief in a city as big as Detroit would not be working the road. However, he had an incident on the road, an attempted carjacking. And it would have been a lot better if he was a certified police officer instead of calling for help, if he could have responded to that crime on his own. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he's a good guy. I think his reign as police chief, there were no real big scandals. I mean, there were a few little things with the drug unit and whatever, but all in all, he didn't get involved in like previous chiefs had gotten involved in like internal scandals, affairs, all that kind of stuff. He kept pretty clean.
I thought he was a decent. I think he was a good chief. You know, was he a great chief? Was he a political chief? I mean, that's the question. Unfortunately, when you're the police chief in a large city, you have to be politically savvy, and he seemed to be able to negotiate the political process in the city very well.
Right. In D.C., the same thing when Charles Ramsey came from Chicago to D.C. D.C. is about and Benny Napoleon had applied for that job as well. Chuck Ramsey, the deputy police chief in Chicago, ended up being the police chief in D.C. He was savvy. He was politically savvy, which in D.C. you've got to be. You're dealing with Congress, you're dealing with a political city council, and you have to be. And Craig was, Craig knew how to navigate. And at one point, he was the deputy mayor as well as he was doing a dual role, which I don't know how much he was actually fulfilling as a deputy mayor while you're police chief. But I guess, whatever. But anyways, I just think it's interesting. Ira says Craig has good intentions, but I think he's a bit confused about what he wants to do. And I think that's probably a pretty good snapshot of what's going on with Craig. I think he really wanted to be. I mean, for a while, the Republicans were pushing him, and he was pushing him on Fox News as the gubernatorial candidate for the Republicans. I think some people were surprised that he was a Republican, but he's a pretty middle of the road Republican. He's not. I think one of the reasons he didn't get endorsed by Trump was that Trump wanted whoever Trump was going to endorse that year was going to have to say that he believed that the election was stolen and that Trump won the 2020 election. And Craig wouldn't do that publicly, which I give him credit for. But at the same time, Trump wasn't going to back him.
How about Par? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Par Orgs. James Craig is out of touch with reality. Par Orgs, I wish you would have tuned in Wednesday because you were the subject of a short conversation. So we missed your last two shows. Kenneth Reed, he was a soundbite chief. I think that's right. They called him Hollywood. But, never found a camera he didn't like. Now he's the chief of the corner bar stool at Sinbad's Tossing. I'm back. Okay. Thanks, Kenneth.
Yeah. Okay. Here's G Money. He says, Allan, it's ironic you brought up Ronald Reagan. When I was at MSU, a roommate of mine had a picture of Reagan and John Wayne on the living room wall. I was like, wow. I had no problem with it, though. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, people really had great affection for Reagan, and I didn't love that he busted the union with the air control folks and stuff like that. But, I think in the end, he understood what bipartisanship was. Him and Tip O'Neill, the Speaker of the House, the Democratic Speaker of the House, they were buddies. They tried to get things done. And, when I was in Washington, so I was at a party one night and someone asked me, what do you think the biggest problem is in Washington now? And I said, the biggest problem is that both sides are dehumanizing each other. I said, both sides need to go get a beer. Go have a meal together. Go see that there's a human being. There's not a Democrat, Republican, but there's humans behind there. And ultimately, we want to have a decent life. We want to be safe. We want to have, prosperity or whatever it is. And we want to, and people want generally the same things. There's a difference. It's like, how do we fight crime? When I was in the Lansing Bureau of the Detroit News, Jim Blanchard did it was like 85, did a expansion of the prison system. And so they started locking up more drug dealers and more drug users, and crime didn't change. Nothing really changed at all. And so we all want less crime. We just have to figure out what's the best method. And the best method isn't always like, lock up everyone, give tougher sentences or whatever. I'm not saying in some cases there should be tougher sentences. I mean, we know there are some people who go to prison who are going to come out and commit crimes again because that's just who they are. And we have to figure out ways how to address those people we know are going to come out again. How do we deal with that? We're a society of second chances, but when we give second chances, we want that second chance to be successful, and we don't want the odds. I mean, we know certain people are coming out and they are definitely going to come back to prison again because they're definitely going to commit a crime. And when we know that, how do we address that? How do we figure out, how do we get it? It's frustrating.
Terry McCrimmon said the day James Craig got ran off Belle Isle by the young man who confronted him and the people saw him run instead of stand his ground, the people saw him as weak. I wonder if that was the beginning of the end of James Craig. The other thing that he did is he said, which was an honest statement that people really had a problem with. I understand both sides of it. But when he told the homeowners of Detroit to get a gun, I think that was offensive to a lot of people. I know where that was coming from. That was coming from his experience as both a police officer in Los Angeles and a police officer in Detroit. He recognized, quite honestly, that the Detroit police can't be everywhere all the time. So I think that hurt him.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I do remember when he was trying to do his Belle Isle press conference and they were shouting him down. And I mean, part of it, whether did he look weak or was it just poor planning and to allow somebody to be that disruptive over particularly your announcement that you're running and it looks chaotic. You look like you can't. I mean, he should have stood up and said, speak, before I speak. Go ahead. What do you have to say? And now get the fuck out of here.
I
yeah.
love it. Absolutely not. This is his show, and he will be back.
Yeah. No, Adolf will be back. But anyway, and so will Vanessa. So you'll be able to hear. Listen,
We're on injured reserve. We're running through. We're like the Lions last year, as I said earlier.
Yeah.
But hopefully we'll be full strength, and you won't have to just listen to the two of us.
Right. But we appreciate it. But anyways, so let's go quickly. I know last night I was going on a little rant about the Detroit Tigers and stuff like that. I want to read some comments from some of the people that matter in the Detroit Tigers. I mean, they lost 10-1 last night, which is just another humiliating loss. And so here is from second baseman Gleyber Torres, who had 2 hits last night, but they only scored 1 run, a home run by Torkelson. And here's what he had to say. We know what's going on right now. Everybody knows, and we're trying to figure out a way to play a little better. Really, there is no panic at all. All the guys, we are together. We are on the same page for sure. The way we are playing is not the way we want to play. Now, A.J. Hinch, the manager, says, look, there is no elephant in the room. It's very obvious where we are in the season and what's at stake and the struggles we've had. I don't think it matters if it's getting tough or whether or not we can flush it. The reality is the next game comes, and that one is equally more important than the previous one. And now here's a fan, and I think he's a public official as well, Eric Thomas Alderman, who posted on X, is a message to the Detroit Tigers. You are embarrassing the state of Michigan. You are embarrassing the city of Detroit. You have humiliated your fans. You took a wonderfully promising season and crapped all over it. If you cough up this division, your names will live in infamy. And so there's a lot of emotion there. And it's like, I find myself being a bigger sports fan, and I think some of it is just a distraction because what's going on in the world, what's going on in this country just drives me crazy. And I feel, it's a form of entertainment. Some people are streaming, on Netflix. And I find myself staying up late sometimes when I'm watching shows that I really like, 1:30 or something. It screws up my sleep cycle, but I can't help it. But
I'll be polite and say it's just freaking baseball.
Right.
NFL is just freaking. That's not the word I really want to use, right? The world was coming to an end because Matthew Stafford wanted to leave. And now we have a quarterback that was, in my opinion, my thoughts, if you look at the stats, it's far better than Matthew Stafford. But it was the end of the world. And when Jared Goff leaves, well, there'll be another quarterback.
Yeah.
There'll be another running back.
I'll disagree with you on one thing. I think Matt Stafford, I think Jared Goff's great. I love him as a quarterback, but I think Matt Stafford is a better quarterback. I think what the difference is, Jared Goff has had protection from a good offensive line, and Stafford just got killed all the time because the line wasn't as good. I think any quarterback, you can watch a game, any quarterback who has time to pass will complete a pass. It's the NFL. These guys are so fast. If you give the quarterback time, somebody's going to break away and catch. So I think Matt Stafford was great to Detroit. I think they donated money for a park, him and his wife. They're still, have a great affinity for here. But yeah, I agree. In the end, it's sports. In the end, it's sports. Look, it's big business for the people who own it. Is big money, and for the people who play it. These players like, Gleyber Torres, the second baseman who came from New York, he's got a 1-year contract, not a superstar. He's good. He got a $15 million contract. That's a lot of money. And when we think about sports, if you tell us somebody's making $2 million playing sports, we think like, oh my God, that's pittance. But in the real world, you and I are making a $2 million a year salary. We're considered wealthy, But these sports guys, if they're, even if they're, some of the bench warmers, I don't know, and like the Pistons or whatever, don't play any games. They get either $800,000 or $1 million. that's a pretty good salary for the average person. So, and I want to read G Money Hollywood says, the Tigers collapse reminded me when the Boston Red Sox came back and beat the Yankees in 2004, being 0-3 down, 0-3, and came back and won 4 in a row. Detroit teams tend to have bad luck. That's our history. And, well, that's, we tend to, I mean, I love it that the city, it raises the spirit of the city gets united, the city gets excited. And I think collectively it's nice when there's something so positive happening. And it's a little, depressing collectively for the city when the Tigers are deflating and they're just melting down. In fact, I did a story in Deadline Detroit, and I did an AI generated illustration to put with this, and the headline is about the Tigers having a meltdown, and here's the AI illustration, which is kind of amazing that it did this in about 2 minutes. So, anyways,
I think we should leave the sports conversation, and I just want to know if you'll be reporting when. And I'm not a fan of statues of any human being, but when the Jared Goff statue goes up in front of Ford Field, I wonder if he'll be reporting.
Oh, well, look, he's, hopefully they'll go somewhere. I mean, it's, what, and not to get too heavily into sports here, but look, we've seen 2 games. The paper line is a good one.
It is.
We've seen 2 games so far. The first game was an extreme of bad, against the Packers. And then the second game was an extreme of good against the Chicago Bears. Now we're going to go play Baltimore, and we'll see what's the reality. Was the first game really the snapshot of who the Lions are, or is the second game or somewhere in between? And we'll see it. They're not going to go 15-2 this year.
Absolutely not.
They've got a rough, they've got the toughest schedule, I think, in the NFL. But they're fun to watch. And like I say, sports is just pure entertainment, great distraction. You see people spend, right now it's interesting. The Lions are the second most expensive ticket in the NFL. The average ticket now, I think, is about $450, which is insane. At first I thought that was bullshit. And I went on the website and started putting the cursor over the seats, and maybe you can find on, some of these ticket websites, you can find something for $250 or $200, but a lot of those tickets some are going for $1,000. It's really, really expensive. I don't like that. And I mean, the good part is that it's televised, which is nice.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up as somebody that owned season tickets for like 16 years. And I'm done with it. The problem is, it used to be that you would buy tickets on the secondary market and you get raped by the ticket sellers. Now, with the ticketing system, whatever they call it, dynamic pricing, now the Detroit Lions, the Detroit Tigers, the Pistons, and everybody is using that dynamic pricing where instead of being raped on the secondary market, the team does it to you. And that's outrageous that a ticket that I would pay $150 for, if you go online today to buy it from the Detroit Lions for a single game, it's $450.
And what do you think about an entrance fee? They're talking about, the city council is talking about a 3% entrance fee, which, for a $30 ticket is, a few bucks, is less than, a $30 ticket, 10% would be $3. So 3% would be like $1. So to me, that's not so much. But when you're talking about a $450 ticket, 3% is a little bit more, it's a little bit more money. The city says it would be good for revenue, added revenue. There are other cities around the country that do that. Is that a smart thing, or is that just too much taxation?
I'm not sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's what are they going to do with the money? Are they going to designate it for or is it just going to go into the general fund and just be, just as a person that worked in government, I see where the money comes, and I saw where the money went. And a lot of times there was little to no accountability. So if they set a 5% fee on tickets for safety at ticketed events, to provide whatever policing for. Let's just say there's a 3% surcharge for special events in Detroit, whether it's the fireworks or the Thanksgiving Day parade, and this money is going directly into that account. I have no problem with that. But if it's just going to be wasted.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the end, I mean, it's insane now. You go to a concert, it's not unusual minimum to pay $75. I know people are paying. You go to the
you won't get into a concert for $75.
Yeah, well, some of the stand-up comedians or whatever, you maybe can get them for $75, $100, but it's insane. So if you were to add $1 or $2 to that, who's going to cry about that? It would generate. I mean, let's say the Tigers get 35,000 fans in one day. That's $35,000 in revenue. The concert at the Little Caesars gets 18,000. That's 18,000. That's a lot of quick revenue. I'm not against, as long as it's benign in terms of another dollar. You're already spending ridiculous amounts for, I hate
we have to end the show, Allan.
Yes. No, we're going on forever. We're just
Jan. You're right. The Lions are going to have their hands full. Look at the lottery system. I agree, Karen. FBA convo. What happens with the extra revenue? My question exactly. The Wings will go nowhere this year. Thanks, Karen. Great conversation. Thank you. Thank everybody that tuned in today. We're holding down the fort for the whole team. Allan and I are trying our best. We appreciate you being here because we understand we're only half the team.
Some of you may have seen this today's as a filibuster, but we were trying to be semi-informative. But we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we appreciate the comments. We it's
we miss them as much as you do, right, Allan? When somebody's gone, we miss them. We miss them as much as you do.
Right, and we're going to have some guests coming up, and I know Reverend Kinlock, as they've reached out to us and asked to come on the show, and so we'll have him on, and we'll see if Mary wants to come on, and we're going to have some. And I'd love to see more high profile stories on the race. I'd like to. I think people in the city of Detroit deserve that to learn more and more about the candidates. So, anyways, Jim, thanks so much. Everybody have a great weekend and go Tigers. I'm trying to have a little enthusiasm and go Lions, and we'll see what happens. And we still got the Red Wings and the Pistons. I have high hopes of the Pistons. The Red Wings, not so much, but we'll see. But anyways, we'll see you. Our next show is on Wednesday night at 8:30. And thanks again, Jim, and thanks, Teresa. One day we're going to get Teresa out here to speak her mind, but Teresa does all the engineering in the background there, and she's like one of those TV shows where you never see her, but of Teresa. So anyways, have a great weekend.